The sound of metal folding into itself was the last thing Lena remembered before the world went quiet. Not the scream, not her mother's voice, just the shriek of tires on ice, the blur of pine trees tilting sideways. And then silence, the kind that fills your ears and chest like water, cold and final. They called it a miracle that she survived, reporters, doctors, neighbors with hollow sympathy in their voices. They said it again and again, as if repetition could make it easier to swallow. Her mother had died on impact. Lena, age 11, had lived, wedged between the crushed passenger door and the glove compartment. Spine twisted, ribs fractured, lungs barely inflating under the weight of glass and snow. They pulled her out after 23 minutes. She stopped counting after the first. By the time she was released from the hospital 3 months later, spring had already begun to gnaw at the edges of the snowcaps, but not in Sage Hollow, Colorado. Not on the Monroe property, where the wind came in low and angry through the canyon, and the trees held onto their frost like it meant something. Lena couldn't feel her legs, not in the tingly, maybe it'll come back way the physical therapists hinted at, but in the deep, detached stillness of limbs that had become strangers. Doctors spoke in percentages and possibilities. June, her grandmother, never did. A retired trauma nurse who'd seen more death than she ever asked for, June simply packed away the wheelchair manuals and focused on what could be done. Widen the door frames, reinforce the ramp, move Lena's bed to the front room facing the mountain ridge. "We work with what we have," she said once. And that was all. But Lena hadn't learned how to work with absence. Not yet. She spent her days tracing the lines between ceiling beams with her eyes, counting every knot in the wood, listening to the tick of the old stove. Her arms still worked. Her voice, too, but she barely used them, not to complain, not to ask. Her silence became a shape in the house, unmoving, unfelt, like the wind that never made it inside. Then came the snowstorm. It blew in sudden, early for autumn, howling through the valley like it had something to prove. The power flickered. Pipes groaned. June kept candles lit in every room and filled pots with water, muttering about unreliable grids and mountain winters that didn't follow calendars. And Lena! She sat by the window, wrapped in 2 quilts, eyes fixed on nothing, until it moved. It came out of the white like a ghost, barely more than shadow against the snow. A dog, large and staggering, coat matted with ice and dirt, ribs visible through fur that had once been thick. Its gait was uneven, dragging one hind leg as if each step cost more than it had to give. But it didn't stop moving, not until it reached the front porch. June noticed first. She'd been stoking the fire when she saw Lena shift, eyes widening, hand pressed flat against the glass. "What is it?" she asked, stepping closer. Lena didn't speak, just pointed. June followed her gaze and froze. The dog stood at the threshold of the porch, barely upright, panting hard enough for vapor to curl from its mouth in small puffs. Around its neck, the ghost of a chain, just the imprint, raw and healed over, but unmistakable. One ear was torn, its eyes were mismatched, one clouded, the other sharp and amber, like frozen honey. "It's hurt," June murmured. Lena didn't answer. Her hand curled tighter around the blanket. June opened the door halfway, just enough to lean out. "Go on now. We don't have food for strays." But the dog didn't run, didn't bark. It just sat, slowly, with deliberate effort, as if acknowledging the request without obeying it. "I'll get a flashlight. Might be a tag," June muttered, pulling on boots and grabbing a coat. But by the time she returned, the dog had already moved again, not away, toward Lena, through the open door, across the hardwood floor, step by careful step, until it reached the edge of the rug near her wheelchair. June tensed, ready to intervene, but Lena lifted a hand. The dog stopped, lowered its head, and lay down beside the wheels, not touching, not begging, just there. June didn't speak for a long time, neither did Lena. That night they let him stay. She named him Echo. The next morning, though she didn't say it out loud, she whispered it, as if naming him too directly might break whatever had formed in that silent exchange. No one came looking for him, No flyers, no microchip, no collar, nothing but the scars, and the haunted way he watched every shadow in the room like it might rise up and strike. June fed him with wary hands, boiled chicken, rice, patience. Echo didn't eat if anyone watched, didn't drink until the room was empty. But he never barked, never growled, and every morning, without fail, he waited by Lena's chair. She began talking again, not to people, to him. Small things, observations, half-formed thoughts that no longer felt safe when said to the wind. Echo didn't react much, but sometimes, when her voice shook or her words paused too long, he'd shift closer, just an inch, just enough for her hand to brush his fur, if she reached, and eventually she did. The first time she touched him, her fingers trembled, not from fear but because the warmth beneath her skin made her realize how cold she had been for so long. Echo didn't move, didn't flinch, just stayed. It was the first time since the accident that Lena had felt like something was staying for her, not out of duty, not out of pity, but by choice. And somehow, that meant everything. With confidence, but with something stronger, she stood, with defiance, with history behind her and a future waiting to be claimed. Her legs were locked in the braces, her arms were shaking, her breath caught in her throat. And then she took a step, not because anyone told her to, but because Echo had. One step, then another. The machine helped, but the choice was hers. Behind her, no one spoke. One therapist had a hand over her mouth. Another had turned away, wiping his eyes. June had entered the room without anyone noticing. She stood in the doorway, hands at her chest, lips trembling. Lena didn't see any of it. She was too focused on the dog who had once known what it felt like to be left behind, and who now, despite it all, refused to let her fall alone. When her knees gave out again, she eased down slowly, lowering herself to the mat with care. She didn't collapse this time. She chose to rest. Echo lowered himself beside her. She leaned into his shoulder. Someone tried to speak. No one could. Later, when Lena was wheeled out the center's back hallway and into the waiting room, Echo trotted beside her, like nothing had changed. The receptionist blinked in confusion. Did someone call for him? June only smiled. No one had to. In the car, Lena sat with the window half open, her fingers resting in Echo's fur. "I saw your scar," she whispered, "and I didn't think less of you. I thought maybe we were made of the same thing." He didn't move, but his body softened beside her, leaning gently against her leg, like an answer. That night, as snow drifted light and lazy against the porch light, Lena asked June if they could practice again the next day. Not for the videos, not for the therapists. For Echo, she said. He came for me when I couldn't come for myself. The quiet that followed Echo's return to the center was fragile. A silence that felt borrowed rather than earned. Lena still spent most mornings on the porch, fingers tracing the frayed hems of the blanket her mother once wrapped her in, eyes scanning the tree line, not for danger, but for proof that the world could still keep something good. Echo never strayed far. He remained close, always within a few steps, yet never imposing. He seemed to understand her rhythm better than anyone else, even better than June, even better than the therapist who spoke in bright tones and hopeful metrics. He didn't demand progress. He waited for it, like the wind waits for thaw. The video was supposed to be a personal victory. Lena had taken 4 steps that day, assisted by a brace and parallel bars, her muscles screaming, her lungs thin on breath. She hadn't wanted it filmed, but the therapist, well-meaning kind, had asked for permission, and she had nodded, too tired to resist. Echo had watched from outside the glass partition, unmoving, his head tilted slightly, as if recording every faltering shift in her weight, every tremble of her jaw. He didn't bark, he didn't flinch. He simply stood there, and that stillness gave her something steadier than balance. The clip wasn't meant to go public, but it did, first quietly, then everywhere. The world saw it and fell in love with the story. A brave girl, a wounded dog, a journey of resilience. Music was added, subtitles, dramatic slow-motion fades. Her name began trending. Journalists called. Offers came in. Interviews, appearances, features. None of it mattered to Lena, because none of them understood what Echo truly was. Not a symbol, not an inspiration, but a presence. A companion who had never once turned away when she failed. But then came the backlash. Someone found an old police report, redacted, thin on detail, heavy on consequence. A K-9 named Echo, discharged after a violent incident during a warehouse raid. The report didn't say much, but it said enough. Enough for speculation, for internet detectives, for shadowy rumors to take root. People began editing together the new video and old footage. One clip showed Echo still as Lena struggled to stand. The other showed a younger Echo lunging during a raid. Side by side, they made their case. "Is this dog safe?" they asked. "Should he be with a child?" No one asked what had happened in between. The petition spread fast. Overprotective parents, community groups, faceless names who claimed to know best. They urged the shelter board and the town council to act. The headlines turned. What was once a miracle became a liability. June tried to intervene, but bureaucracy has no face, only procedures. Clara wrote to every outlet she could find, but the silence on the other end felt colder than the snow outside. The order came on a Thursday morning. Animal control, a sheriff's deputy, a crate in the back of a white van. Lena didn't speak. She couldn't. The moment she saw the van, her mind emptied. Her lungs collapsed inward. All she could do was sit in the wheelchair, hands knotted around the arms, as if holding on could keep the world from changing again. They tried to be gentle, the officers. They explained it was temporary, just a review, just to make sure the town was safe. Echo didn't resist. When the crate was placed before him, he stepped inside without hesitation, as if he'd done this before, as if he'd already learned that the world often punishes silence because it can't understand it. He didn't look back. The gate clicked shut, the van rolled away, and the wind on the porch grew so sharp it felt like it could cut bone. What followed wasn't rage, it was worse. Lena withdrew, pulled inward like a tide leaving shore. She stopped practicing, refused the walker, barely spoke. Her hands, once clutching at life, now sat idle in her lap. No sobbing, no screaming, just stillness. Echo's kind of stillness, but without his strength. The stillness of someone who no longer believed the world was worth waking up for. If they can take him that easy, what else can they take? Lena whispered. To no one. To the silence that had replaced everything she once believed in. June stayed close, trying not to hover, unsure what words meant anything now. She made Lena's tea just the way her mother used to. She opened the windows to let in spring air. She left dog biscuits in Echo's bowl, like he might come home on his own. Nothing helped. Lena sat at the window for hours, staring not into the woods, but into the reflection of her own face, trying to recognize the girl inside. Then, 5 days later, someone knocked on the door, not firm, not demanding, just 3 gentle taps. June opened it to find a tall man with weathered features and a limp that suggested an old injury healed wrong. No uniform, no badge. Just jeans, a coat too thin for the season, and a manila folder in one hand. "My name is Daniel Myers," he said softly. "I used to be Echo's handler." He didn't come in like a man with answers. He came in like someone who had run out of ways to stay silent. He placed the folder on the kitchen table and sat, not at the head, but to the side, like he didn't want to take up space he didn't deserve. And then he began to tell the truth. Years ago, during a warehouse raid, he had made a call. He'd missed a signal. Echo had growled, warned him to wait, but Daniel pushed forward, too fast. The suspect moved. A shot was fired. In the scramble, Daniel's arm was grazed, not by the suspect, not by Echo, but by his own misfire. His hand had slipped, panicked. The bullet clipped his bicep. It hadn't even needed stitches. But in the aftershock, with officers swarming and supervisors demanding reports, Daniel hadn't had the courage to admit his mistake. So Echo took the blame. The report was filed. The dog was retired. Quietly, without trial, without protest. "I was a coward," Daniel said, "and he paid for it. He had watched the new video in silence, guilt pulsing with every frame. He hadn't known Echo had survived the shelters, not until Lena's story broke, and now, seeing the same dog who once waited at a warehouse door, now waiting beside a broken child, Daniel couldn't carry it anymore. June didn't speak. Lena hadn't moved, but when Daniel placed the original report beside the redacted one, signed and dated in his own hand, the weight of what had happened finally settled across the table, like snow on the roof, quietly, steadily, undeniably. That night the shelter board received the evidence, and the very next morning Echo came home, not rescued, not pardoned, but rightfully returned. There was no announcement, no ceremony, no official return. Echo simply came home. If this tale moved you, if you felt the tension, the heartbreak, and the triumph, please support our channel by hitting the like button and subscribing. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring more thrilling, emotional, and inspiring stories your way. Leave a comment below and let us know what you think. Do you believe dogs have an extraordinary sixth sense? Share your thoughts and personal stories with us. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.